When you look in the government of the United Kingdom these days, what do you see? Their failing policy on tackling poverty. They're the cause of poverty. Or their failing Brexit policy. Their traitorous leanings towards selling out the United Kingdom to the European Union. Or do you see that Theresa May is actually doing a very good job? Today on Around the World, we will be talking about this failing government in the United Kingdom and in the United States, funny enough.
Podcasts brought to you by Real Terrio Radio. Around the world today here on Real Terrio Radio.
Hello and welcome to Around the World today, here on Real Terrio Radio Podcasts with me, Terry D. So we're talking about the failing policies of the United Kingdom government, who last night managed to scathe a majority of 19, thank you to their bribery and corruptions. Now, it's quite funny because yes, they are bribing the Democratic Union Party of Northern Ireland. Yes, they are corrupt because Parliament have found them in contempt of Parliament. So, calling them a corrupt, bribing party isn't actually illegal, because what they're doing is trying to keep themselves in power so they can have their own way. Now, what seems to fail many Brexiteers is that you voted to take back control. You voted to allow Parliament to be sovereign. When Parliament uses its rights to be sovereign under the parliamentary, in this country, in the United Kingdom, we don't have a constitution, so everything is done by how it is done before. So it is customary set out. In Parliament, it's set out by standing orders, and so on. And like tradition. So you don't like how you want our Parliament, you want our elected representatives to be able to be the sovereign, but you don't like it when they're exercising their rights. I just find that laughable, but we're not going to get on to Brexit and the woes and the whys and how we voted and what we should vote. This isn't about Brexit. It's a bigger thing. Yesterday, this government was propped up, and got a 19 majority, thank you to the DUP in Northern Ireland. Just because they are they don't believe in rights of any kind. They believe in sectarian violence. They're even worse of the IRA. In my opinion, the both organisations of Sinn Féin and the DUP should never have been allowed to sit in the Parliament of the United Kingdom, first and foremost. They are criminal organisations as far as I'm concerned in this country. They have links to terrorism. Theresa May goes on about Jeremy Corbyn's links to the IRA, and Jeremy Corbyn's links to this organisation, and Jeremy Corbyn's links to that organisation. Yesterday, you had an MP stand up in the House of Commons saying, well, the leader of the opposition has been under investigation by Secret Service, MI5, for about 30-odd years. I have a question. If this was actually true, and he was still under investigation by the security services, and still being looked into by MI5, by GCHQ, by MI6, do you really think that we would know about it? British security services are very good at hiding secrets. So do you really think that if most of these allegations were true and that they were still doing it, that we would know? Then you hear the rumour that he was a spy for the Soviets. What's quite funny is, so was Kim Philby. Kim Philby was a member of the Conservative Party. Do you know what I mean here? But anyway, shall we start all the way back to 2010 and austerity? So, a nice little lady, a man named David Cameron, did a deal with a man called Nicholas Clegg. Now, you may remember Nick Clegg, because Nick Clegg lied to every student saying that they were going to abolish tuition fees. Something that they didn't do, but instead voted with the Conservative government to raise tuition fees. So, lied to every student, made them vote for him, but then backtracked. But also put through legislation called a Fixed Term Parliament Act. Now, before yesterday, the day before, Theresa May suffered a loss of 230, I believe, a majority of 230 towards Corbyn, because MPs from all sides could not support her traitorous deal. When you're selling out sovereignty, even more greater sovereignty, away from your parliament and then to the European Union, question you got to ask is, when you're trying to intimidate and say that the leader of the opposition is a traitor and would sell out the country, but you're doing the exact same thing, can anyone see the problem there? If you're doing the exact same thing, you were about to sell out your country. She lost by 230. This was the biggest defeat, and I don't know the exact number because I haven't got it up in front of me, but this was the biggest defeat in history of Parliament, suffered by a government. And yesterday a vote of no confidence, and the same people, your likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg, Anna Salisbury, who all voted against this deal, voted with the government, just because they know that if they had to call a general election, most of them would lose their seats. The Conservative Party at this moment in time just seem to be trying to hold on to power. They're putting their party before their country. This is what she had to say after the vote was announced yesterday. She gave a press conference about 10 o'clock last night because Jeremy Corbyn refused to attend.
This evening, the government has won the confidence of Parliament. This now gives us all the opportunity to focus on finding a way forward on Brexit. I understand that to people getting on with their lives away from Westminster, the events of the past 24 hours will have been unsettling. Overwhelmingly, the British people want us to get on with delivering Brexit and also address the other important issues they care about. But the deal which I have worked to agree with the European Union was rejected by MPs and by a large margin. I believe it is my duty to deliver on the British people's instruction to leave the European Union, and I intend to do so. So now MPs have made clear what they don't want. We must all work constructively together to set out what Parliament does want. That's why I'm inviting MPs from all parties to come together to find a way forward. One that both delivers on the referendum and can command the support of Parliament. This is now the time to put self-interest aside. I have just held constructive meetings with the leader of the Liberal Democrats and the Westminster leaders of the SNP and Plaid Cymru. From tomorrow, meetings will be taking place between senior government representatives, including myself, and groups of MPs who represent the widest possible range of views from across Parliament, including our confidence and supply partners, the Democratic Unionist Party. I am disappointed that the leader of the Labour Party has not so far chosen to take part, but our door remains open. It will not be an easy task, but MPs know they have a duty to act in the national interest, reach a consensus, and get this done. In a historic vote in 2016, the country decided to leave the EU. In 2017, 80% of people voted for parties that stood on manifestos promising to respect that result. Now, over 2.5 years later, it's time for us to come together, put the national interest first, and deliver on the referendum.
See, I put it to you that the national interest is actually the Conservative Party interest and not the interest of the citizens of the United Kingdom. It's not in our interest, it's in her interest, it's in her party's interest, it's in her donors' interests that we stay apart. At the end of the day, she says about unity and coming together. This should have happened 2.5 years ago. Not 2 months before 2.5 months, before we crash out of the European Union. We should have been united as a country heading into the negotiations. We should have never been as separated as we are. She has divided this country across many party lines. Then she had the audacity to say that we should, the British people want them to get on with Brexit, want them to get on then with other stuff. No, I put it to you that the British people deserved a government in the last 2.5 years that not only put Brexit at the forefront, but also put changes to workers' rights, changes to the benefit system, to make it more workable and understanding, allowed funding for the NHS. May I remind you, she keeps talking about funding for the NHS, but I don't remember ever hearing in my lifetime of 32 years of junior doctors going on strike. That's what you've had with this government. You have had junior doctors go on strike. Now, if you're a doctor or a nurse, you take your oath quite serious, especially if you're a doctor, you take the Hippocratic oath very serious. Do you know what I mean? For junior doctors to say, well, we're going on strike, we're not going to come to work, we are going to picket the hospital, we're not going to treat our patients. You know that the NHS funding, it's not about funding. It's about something bigger. Because these doctors, right, have just spent 5 years plus training to become a doctor. Do you know what I mean? You're not going to waste 5 years of your life, get to the hospital and then say, well, I'm going on strike. It's like a coal miner. It was the last thing that the coal miners wanted to do. And the people at British Steel. Do you really think that people who went on strike during the 80s under Margaret Thatcher really wanted to go on strike with no pay? So they couldn't support their families. No, it was the last thing that you do. I also put it to you that she caused a culture within... She had the audacity to say to police officers that they should suck it up at one point. This was brought up at Prime Minister's questions yesterday by the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, to her. I watched this part of Prime Minister's questions and she just looked there very confused. Because she didn't know which Home Secretary it was. It was her. It appalls me to think that the only thing the United Kingdom can do is be supported by the DUP, who are holding the Northern Irish people to ransom here, mind. Because in the last 2.5 years, what you've seen is that what you've seen is that Northern Ireland no longer has an executive government. So all of its power is now concentrated via its civil service into the United Kingdom under the Minister of State, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, who happens to be an English MP from an English constituency. Now, and all of this is because the DUP did a deal with the Conservatives. She calls herself a unionist party, but she's alienated half of Northern Ireland. She calls herself a unionist party, she's alienated Wales. She has cut funding to Wales. Mainly in constituencies that don't vote Conservative. So, take my own constituency. She cut funding to Swansea. She cut a lot of funding to Swansea. She says about a city deal. Well, the city deal is currently on hold. The funding for it is on hold. She cut rail funding between Cardiff and Swansea. And every constituency between Cardiff and Swansea vote Labour. She then cut funding for the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon. Once again, Swansea East has voted Labour, well, since about the 1920s. I know the funny thing is, I've been reading about the first Swansea East Labour MP, as he's my 4 times great uncle, and was the first working class member of Parliament, the first working class councillor for Swansea Town, and the first working class mayor of Swansea. He was also given the freedom of Swansea in 1924. Now, I'm here to tell you that constituency isn't about to change to Conservative anytime soon. Neither's this one, where I live in Swansea West. But I also say to you, watch out for the fools. There are people out there who believe that Theresa May, the sun shines out of Theresa May's backside. That Theresa May is the Messiah. However, no, she's not. Now, on Sunday, I attended my local church, or my city's church, St Mary's. If you ever come to Swansea, take a look at it. It's a huge church to me. And I know I'm digressing, but to me, if you come past where the Swansea quadrant is, you see the Swansea Devil in one window, and if you're walking from the shopping centre across, and you see the main door, it looks like a little TARDIS, because you only see the entrance. But then, when you go in, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the way, I've got a funny feeling I've joined the Mothers Union, even though I'm a man. But hey, and I've signed up to actually help feed homeless people. I find it appalling that across from this church, right, and it's not the church's fault, it's not, it's not our fault here in Wales, it's not the Welsh Assembly's fault, that you have a fire exit in a shop, a well-known ladies' well, they're unisex now, aren't they? A well-known unisex shop, and another food store in between. And when you go into these places, or past these places, all you can see are homeless people's belongings, bedding, pillows. Do you know what I mean? That have just been left there for the next night. And this is because of government legislation formed in the Westminster Parliament legislation controlled and brought by the Conservative Party. You've got people who say, well, Labour get a vote. Yeah, they get a vote, but they're not in a majority. The ones in the majority since 2010 are the Conservatives. Because the Conservatives have been allowed to get through every piece of their legislation because they did a deal. First, they did a deal with the Liberal Democrats, who sold out all the students. Then they did a deal. Then, Cameron got 2 years on his own with a majority, and Cameron got through some of his legislation, most of it actually, of his conservative hippiness. And then once he got this through, he got Brexit through. And then Brexit, the referendum came about. He loses. On the next day, he quits. He doesn't regret that, mind. And he doesn't regret the referendum. That's nice of him, isn't it? He said, no matter what, before the referendum, he said no matter what the outcome is, he's going to implement it. How is he implementing it if the day after he quit? The funny thing is, I also put it to you that what Cameron was doing was screwed over the United Kingdom. He was trying to throw his toys out the pram. You know when a child is not angry, is very angry actually, and has a temper tantrum? That's what he did the day he came out and resigned. You can see this. Cameron sold out the country just like May has. Cameron has sold us all out. Now, yes, if you voted to leave the European Union, you voted on those grounds. I find it quite, I don't know, hypocrisy at the least, to tell you the truth. It's meanwhile, you have, like I said, you have people sleeping on the streets in the city. Swansea is the second biggest city in Wales. It's the second city of Wales. Now, if you go an hour away to Cardiff, the capital city of Wales, there's even more homeless people on the streets than there are here. Do you know what I mean? If you go to Bristol, what's an hour and a half away from Cardiff, you're seeing a pattern here. Do you know what I mean? Bristol is in England. There is a pattern forming. There is a rise of food banks. There's a rise of homeless shelters. Under this government, because of their hostile territory in handling poverty, or handling the needs of the citizens of the United Kingdom, because for me personally, I see it as that Theresa May is thinking she can only follow, like a ruler. If you lay out a ruler, and I'm doing this when I'm talking to you because I've got a memory stick in my hand that goes around your arm, it's like a metal thing. Now, it can bend, it can fold, but if you put it out straight, you can use it as a ruler, okay? But if you put this down and you get a normal ruler, now a normal wooden ruler, shall we say, that you used to have in school, it doesn't bend, it doesn't get smaller, it doesn't know, do you know what I mean? It can't, or it's unable to change its direction, change its shape, change its form, change its ideas, change its thinking. And I think that this is the problem with the government. Theresa May is too blinkered on a course like a train track. If you're on a train, right, and you're travelling between Swansea and London, and you get to Reading, actually Swansea and Cardiff, because I know there's only 2 tracks, and you get to Bridgend, or even better, you get to Port Talbot, and the train in front of you breaks down. The train behind you has to sit there and wait until the train in front of you has gone, because there's only one line. Now, if you're on a motorway, you're able to make a new course. You're able to set a new course. If you're in the air, you're also able to set a new course. But if you're on tracks, like a train, and I'm using this analogy because when we come on to government failures, we are going to talk about the Transport Secretary. And I know this has seemed about 20 minutes of me talking about my views, but, you know, I'm going to back all of this up in this podcast because basically last night what happened is that you saw a Conservative government being propped up by bribery and corruption. If this was in the outside world in business and, you know, the authorities found out, Theresa May would be in court. She'd be in the neck. So yesterday, when they voted no confidence, this is the MP Michael Gove, who sells his soul out to whoever gives him the most money, whenever, wherever. Here we go.
Mention in his speech the leader of the opposition. Why he should be Prime Minister. Now, he doesn't want him to be Prime Minister. Yes. I have a lot of time for the Honourable Member. We have several things in common. He's lost weight recently. We both lost weight recently, I should say. Him much more so. We're both friends of Israel. Him much more so. And we both recognise that the member for Islington North is about the worst possible person to lead the Labour Party. Much more so. Now, as well as great speeches from the backbenches, we also had some interesting speeches from the front benches. We had a speech of over 20 minutes from my great friend, the leader of the Scottish National Party in this place. But again, in those 20 minutes, he did not once mention the common fisheries policy. I think everyone in Scotland who recognises the potential to free ourselves from the common fisheries policy which Brexit provides will note that in 20 minutes of precious parliamentary time, the SNP didn't mention them, aren't interested in them, and as far as the fishing people of Scotland are concerned, the SNP have literally nothing to say. From the leader of the Liberal Democrats, someone whom I also have affection and respect for, and he made a number of good points. But he also said that he regretted the referendum. This from the party that was the first in this House to say that we should have a referendum on EU membership. And because he doesn't like the result of the last referendum, he now wants another referendum. The Liberal Democrat policy on referendums is not the policy of Gladstone or Lloyd George, it's the policy of Vicky Pollard. No, but yeah, but no, but yeah. I should also commend the speech given by the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party. He explained that he had been inundated with text messages today from people who were saying, please, 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 people in this House, please, please, please back the government tonight. And some of those text messages had even come from Conservatives. And I think, critically, when we think about confidence in this country and in this government, there is a daily vote of confidence which is being executed by the individuals investing in this country, creating jobs and opportunity for all our citizens. Under this government, this country remains the most successful country for foreign direct investment of any country in Europe, with more than £1.3 billion being invested in the last year. That is why Forbes magazine says that this country is the best destination for new jobs in the world. It's why the independent organisation JLL say the best place for the future of services in the world is here in the United Kingdom. It is why, once again, London has been recorded by independent inspectors as the best place in the world for tech investment. And we see that when Spanish rail firms like Talgo shortlist 6 destinations for investment for new rolling stock, all 6 in the United Kingdom. When Boeing opened a new factory in Sheffield to create jobs for British workers. When Chanel moved from France to London in order to establish a new corporate headquarters. And when Starbucks moved from Amsterdam to London in order to ensure more investment and jobs. The opposition should wake up and smell the coffee. And all of this, in the words of the BBC, despite Brexit. Now that investment, those jobs that have been created...
I'm sorry, but this is about 28 minutes long, and I haven't said anything for a while, but I now want to tell you, if you're listening from abroad, all about this. I really want to call him a child. The child, Michael Gove. Did you know that he was going to run against Boris Johnson as the leader, but his wife told him no? His wife spoiled the chances and helped cement Theresa May's position. Did you know that up until 2014, so between 2010 and 2014, he was the Secretary of State for Education? He wanted to build schools for the future. He brought in exam and curriculum reforms, 2012 English GCSE results. Should we have a look at this? Because if I remember correctly, the English GCSE results in 2012 were the worst. That's 2 years after they took over. You know, they were the worst. In September 2012, following the furore surrounding the downgrading of GCSE results in England, he refused, during his answers to Parliamentary Education Committee on the 12th of September, to instruct Off Equal to intervene, and attacked his Welsh counterpart as irresponsible and mistaken for ordering disputed GCSEs to be regraded. On the 17th of September, he announced to the House of Commons that an English baccalaureate certificate will replace GCSEs, comprising English, Maths and Science together with a humanitarian subject and language would be the first examinations in 2017. He plans to replace GCSE examinations with English baccalaureates were rejected by Parliament in February 2013. So he failed to get through his major legislation to re-tackle GCSEs. Should we look at education vouchers? As Secretary of State for Children, Schools and Families, Grove advocated the introduction of a Swedish-style voucher system whereby parents can choose where their child should was the Prime Minister and was the Prime. So we have Michael Grove. As we were just talking about. Now, there's more hypocrisy to him here, because in 2014, in June 2014, there was a Birmingham schools row. It was a very public argument between the Home Office and the Department of Education ministers responsible for alleged extremism in Birmingham schools, which required the Prime Minister at the time to intervene and resolve it. Michael Grove is the most incompetent Minister of State that this country has ever seen, next to Boris Johnson. Considering that both of them were very good friends and quite high up in the Leave campaign, I'd love to know what he's done. When you've got all of the other Brexiteers voting against the deal, and you've got Michael Grove voting with the government to save his position, you've got to ask yourself, in what world is Michael Grove living in? Who is his loyalties to? Party Theresa May? Is it to the party? Is it to Theresa May? Is it to the country? Or is it to himself, Michael Grove? I put it to you that Michael Grove's first and foremost loyalty is not unto party, is not unto the country, and is not unto the Prime Minister. Michael Grove's loyalties lie with Michael Grove. He's also criticised, besides criticising social work and social work training, he's also criticised the teaching profession. It's alright, though, because a month after David Cameron, you all remember David Cameron, he was a bit of an idiot, he used to be the Prime Minister of the country, he'd always go down as the Prime Minister who sold out the United Kingdom, who actually screwed the United Kingdom up. But basically, there was a reshuffle on the, on the 15th of July 2014, where Grove's 4-year stint in charge of the Department for Education came to an end. When he was replaced the Secretary of State by the former Treasury Minister Nicky Morgan in a wide-ranging cabinet reshuffle, and moved to the post of Government Chief Whip. I know, shocking, isn't it? This was portrayed as a demotion by his directors, although the Prime Minister David Cameron denied this was the case. Grove told the BBC that he had mixed emotions about starting the new role, saying it's a privilege to become Chief Whip, but leaving the Department of Education was a wrench. If you ask me, I probably think that the civil servants in the Department of Education were throwing a party. I know many head teachers and many head teachers in England and many school teachers in England were throwing a party. So were the social workers. Then, in 2015 to 2016, after the general election, you remember the 2015 general election, where David Cameron called for this referendum, basically. However, in the 2015 election, Cameron won a majority, if you remember. And he was promoted again. This time as Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary. Oh my God, can you get any more incompetent? No wonder why the legal system in this country doesn't work properly. His newly formed cabinet, right, Cameron's cabinet, he was praised in December 2015 for scrapping the court fees introduced by his predecessor, Chris Grayling. Now, we're going to be talking about Chris Grayling in another episode, well, in this episode, in a bit, about Chris Grayling and his, because he's another one who's the most incompetent, right? I'm labelling 3 incompetents here, well, 4 if you count Philip Hammond as well. But I'll tell you about some of the incompetencies of the front bench of our government. And these are the people who the DUP, that's the DUP under Arlene Foster, who doesn't hold a mandate whatsoever to represent anyone, because currently the executive and the legislator of Northern Ireland it's not functioning. So she went to Downing Street yesterday as a party leader, but she doesn't hold a mandate. No one asked her to go to Downing Street. No one asked her to represent the views of Northern Ireland. She does not have a mandate to speak. She is a normal citizen like myself and you, who do not have a mandate to speak for a part of the United Kingdom. But anyway, he was praised for scrapping the costs. The fee had been heavily criticised for, among other things, causing innocent people to plead guilty out of financial concerns. Grove removed the 12-book limit on prison books introduced by Grayling, arguing that books increase literacy and numeracy, skills needed for making prisoners a potential asset for society. The move was effective, and from 2015 it was welcomed by Francis Cook of the Howard League for Penal Reform. Grove was praised for his prominent role in scrapping the British bid for a Saudi prison contract. Within 3 months of taking office, the Criminal Bar Association voted to stop the new work in protest of Grove's insistence that they work for lower fees. The CBA subsequently praised his courage and reversing his proposed cuts. On the 14th of July, a year and 1 day after the election, Grove was removed from position of Justice Secretary by the new Prime Minister, Theresa Mason. Okay. He also ran to be party leader a couple of times too. He had the audacity yesterday to say how bad a Prime Minister Jeremy Corbyn would make. But when you've only served as Justice Secretary for a year, you served as Education Secretary for 4 years, and you're the most incompetent minister that we have. Do you know what I mean? You've got to ask yourself, why? You've got to ask yourself, what kind of man, what kind of leader would this make? He would not make a good Prime Minister. No more than Jacob Rees-Mogg would make a good Prime Minister. Then we have, in 2017, he was made Secretary for Environmental, Rural Affairs and Food. Really good. I'm not going to go into what he's done right now because all of this is quite recent, so you can read it yourself. However, in 2005, over a 5-month period between 2005 and April 2006, Michael Gove claimed more than £7,000 on a house bought with his wife Sarah Vine, a journalist, in 2002. Around a third of the money was spent on OKA, an upmarket interior design company established by the Viscountess Astor, PM David Cameron's mother-in-law, may one add. Shortly afterwards, it was reportedly flipped his diagnosed second home, a designated second home, a property of which it claimed around $13,000 to cover stamp duty. Grove claimed for a cot mattress, despite children's items being banned under Commons rules. I'm sorry, but which kind of father claims expenses for their children from the business that they work for or the organisation they work for? You wouldn't. You really wouldn't if you can't afford... Sorry, but you're a Conservative. The Conservatives believe that if you can't afford to have children, you shouldn't have children. Now, in this case, you've got a Minister of the Crown, right, or an MP, claiming for a cot mattress for his child. Obviously, if he had to claim against the taxpayers, funding from the taxpayer, he couldn't afford his children. He couldn't afford to have children. So therefore, Michael Gove doesn't really follow party policy, does he? Of Conservative values. That's the one. Now, where were we? But he maintained... it's against the rules, but he paid that back for the cot mattress, but maintained that other claims were below the acceptable threshold costs for furnishings, and that moving house was necessary to effectively discharge his parliamentary duties. While he was moving between homes, on one occasion he stayed at the Penny Hill Park Hotel and Spa following a constituency engagement, charging the taxpayer more than £500 per night for his stay. That's a nice one. Grove's second home was not in his constituency, but in Estelle, in the southwest Surrey constituency. Grove sold his house and now commutes to his constituency. So basically, he doesn't even live in his local area. Am I the only one thinking how wrong this is? Then in 2012, Grove has been subject to many Freedom of Information emails and criticisms. Now, under the Freedom of Information Act, the criticism surrounds Grove's use of various private emails account to send emails that allegedly relate to his governmental department responsibilities. The allegation suggests that Grove and his advisors believed that they could avoid their correspondence being subject to the Freedom of Information request, as they believed that the private email accounts were not subject to freedom of information. In September 2011, the Financial Times reported that Grove had used an undiagnosed private email account to call Mrs. Burt to discuss government business with advisors. It's okay, it gets better. In March 2012, Information Commissioner ruled that because the emails the Financial Times had requested combined public information, they could be the subject of a Freedom of Information request and ordered the information requested by the paper to be disclosed, Grove was advised to cease the practice of using private emails to conduct government business. He has disputed the Information Commissioner's ruling and the process of the tribunal, costing the taxpayers £12,540 in fees. And for legal advice, the appeal was withdrawn. Well, yes. Austerity, do you know what I mean? In 2012, he stood on an election manifesto of austerity. Well, if you can waste £12,540 on because you fucked up in the first place, the question you've got to ask yourself is, how incompetent are you? But it's alright. It was also alleged that Grove, and his advisors destroyed all email correspondence in order to avoid the Freedom of Information requests. The allegation was denied by Grove's department, which stated that deleting the email was simply part of good computer housekeeping. However, if you go into an email and you go into the deleted items, unless you've deleted them in there and you've theoretically gone in and you've pressed delete, it's not really good practice. In a capacity as a writer for the Times, Grove gave the first British post-election interview with Donald I'm an Idiot Orange Trump in January 2017, along with Kai Dittenbach, from the bid, making him the second British politician to meet the President-elect of the United States after Nigel Farage. Despite preferring Hillary Clinton to Trump as President of the United States, Grove's interview was consistent defence of it has been by some patronising the President-elect unduly, and the photograph of Grove giving a thumbs up to Trump was widely mocked on social media. He also made a joke about Harvey Weinstein. Now, in 1997, Grove wrote in support of bringing back hanging and capital punishment, which was abolished in 1965. Now, 1965, how old is Michael Grove? What year was he born? Okay, so basically, Michael Grove wanted to bring back capital punishment that ended in the United Kingdom in 1965 but wasn't born until 1967. So he never lived under capital punishment. So all his life, you've never had capital punishment in this country. Am I the only one that's seeing what's wrong with Michael Grove? Now, we're going to be moving on to the next minister, or fuck-up minister, as I call them. And the next one is going to be the Transport Minister, Chris Grayling. You know about him, right? Chris Grayling went out before Christmas, and his department awarded a contract to a ferry company that, firstly, right... Now, you're probably thinking here, well, a ferry company, Department of Transport awarding a contract to a ferry company, well, that's fine. But what you probably don't know is that the ferry company has no ferries. The ferry company has no routes. The port where the ferry company wishes to operate from isn't even capable of taking ferries. Oh, and two of the directors of the company are under investigation by the Serious Fraud Squad. But hey, this is fine according to Chris Grayling. Chris Grayling also is responsible for not the Welsh actually. No, he's not. Thank God. But Chris Grayling is also responsible for the transport network in England and in the United Kingdom as well. But Chris Grayling's department last year, if you remember, with the Northern Rail problem, timetables, giving a contract to Virgin, where Stagecoach and Virgin trains for the Virgin East Coast, then just under a year having to take back the contract into government ownership. A bit incompetent, isn't it? When you've got to take back something that you've already... With the East Coast Sea, it was already in government ownership. Then they franchised it back to private operators. Then it had to be taken back into public ownership. Question: if you've got to do this the first time and you haven't fixed the problem the second time, do you know what I mean? It was always inevitable that this contract was going to be taken back because the company weren't able to meet the deadlines or anything like this. Now, these people, Chris Grayling, right? You might think to yourself, well, it's the transport network. Transport isn't anything. Do you know what I mean? However, without a transport network, this country falls to a grinding halt. People don't go to work. People don't go, like, out. Goods don't get delivered. Without a proper transport network and a proper transport plan, this country really does fall on its knees. But Chris Grayling doesn't understand this, because Chris Grayling's only been the Transport Secretary for just under 2 years, I believe. You've got to ask yourself, with a cabinet like this, you have in the cabinet as well. Now, last year you might have heard of the Windrush scandal. You have Amber Rudd back in the cabinet. Yes, Amber Rudd can be seen. You can't say that Amber Rudd really, you know, it was her predecessor that she inherited the Windrush scandal from, and her predecessor was the Prime Minister. And she was able to, you know, the Prime Minister's not going to quit because of it. Look at it. She loses her majority. She loses... Right, this is what happened under under Theresa May. She lost her majority. She stays on. She loses her finance bill. Couple of them, actually. She stays on. Oh, sorry, before finance bill, she actually... Well, she lost the vote of contempt, and she was found in contempt of Parliament. She stays on. No other government has ever been found in contempt of Parliament. At all. In history of this part of the United Kingdom. But she stays on. You then have that Theresa May was lost the finance bill, unable to keep on in a party vote of no confidence against the leader. You know, where I said last night that these MPs, they're quite hypocritical, because a third of these MPs voted against Theresa May to be leader of their party, but then a month later support her in running in a confidence vote to save their positions. So what is it? Put country before... What? So we put party before country? That's what I put it to you. The Conservative Party, and we're going to move on because we've been really going around the thing, but back to Amber Rudd first. Amber Rudd, right, she had to take the sword. She had to fall on the sword for Theresa May's incompetence, basically. Like I said, Theresa May can only follow a straight line. If the line gets curved in any way whatsoever, so now on Wednesday, if you heard her speech from Tuesday night, where she lost her majority again by 230, and also once again, this is the biggest. This has never happened in our political system before. No Prime Minister has lost a vote that big. But she still thinks she can command a majority. You cannot command a majority. Before, right, go back to 2010 under Cameron and Nicholas Clegg, where we've got, you know, them doing a deal. So they were able to save their position and to stop the opposition parties from bringing a vote of no confidence in the government. They brought in a fixed-term Parliament Act cementing their position. Now, Theresa May said in the 2017 election she wished to get rid of this legislation. Lucky she hasn't got rid of this legislation, isn't it? Because it would have seen Theresa May yesterday not having a vote of no confidence but going to the Queen to resign, because Theresa May has lost a finance bill, a party manifesto bill, because Brexit is a party manifesto point. So one has to ask themselves, what are they playing at? If they think they can hold on to power, what I say is that the people of the United Kingdom aren't as stupid as what the Conservatives try and make them out to be. And that they're seeing what they're doing, you know, holding on to power for no reason, because they want to get it done their way. Well, that's all well and good, right? Them holding on to their power. And going to move on this little bit of the podcast. I'm going to talk about other stuff. How about the waiting lists in England? How about homelessness in England, Wales, and Scotland, and Northern Ireland? Well, in the United Kingdom. How about children going to school without a meal because their parents can't afford it? Because, you know, the government either cut their budgets or cut, you know, a lot of stuff. How about... Oh. Okay. How about, do you know what I mean? I'm just so... All you've heard is Brexit. How about knife crime? What the government failed to tell you is that they cut the budgets of the police force. Now, well, they didn't... No, they cut the number of police officers, but hired the budget. But I put it to you that, okay, like anything, you can put as much money as you want in it, but if you haven't got the staff to implement it, there's no point in putting the money in, is there? Because you just have an abundance of money in the end. What's just funny, because you have an abundance of money, but you're not doing anything with the money. Because you can't do anything with the money. She cut police officers on the streets. Now, all people are blaming Sadiq Khan, as Mayor of London. But actually, what they failed to take into account is that Theresa May was the Home Secretary. Amber Rudd was the Home Secretary. Sadiq David was the Home Secretary. The Home Secretary, as well as the Mayor of London, has the direct responsibility for the Metropolitan Police Service and appointing the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police Service. Before Sadiq Khan came to power, Boris Johnson was the Mayor of London. So between 2010 and when Boris Johnson stepped down as Mayor of London in 2016, sorry. Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party were responsible for the cuts to the Metropolitan Police Service's budgets. Were responsible to the number of police officers cutting. Then you've got Grenfell Tower, right, with a fire. I believe it took 6 minutes extra for the fire brigade to get there. It took some time for them to get there, where the fire station used to be around the corner. Do you know what I mean? For the first responders to be on the scene. This was because of Conservative cuts. The cuts to our society are quite overreaching now, that it affects every part of society. Meanwhile, MPs get a pay rise. You've got normal working people, as was brought up yesterday by certain Labour MPs. You have working people in this country that hasn't seen a pay rise for nearly over a decade. Next year in 2020, it will be a decade that these people have not seen a pay rise. What this country needs is some kind of hope, some kind of new way to be able to go. We need fresh ideas, it seems to me. And I was having this conversation with a friend, we were talking about it, and I said, does it sound like to you that governments only think of like 5 years? They're 5 years. No government seems to think about the sustainable or the strategic impact of something over a lifetime, so over the full project, or, you know, over, like, should we say a decade, or even over 20 years or 30 years. No one sees the foresight of forward planning more than 5 years. I'm sorry, but that's just ridiculous. You could tell that there's been cuts, because I'm reading a story just now where a lorry driver who dumped 100 tons of waste in a school. At a school! Do you know what I mean? It's alright, he's been given a £20,000 bill and jailed for 12 months. Oi. That was in Manchester. But, you know, we got off topic there. Sorry, I just thought that one was funny. But you know, something like this, when it's happening, right, where businesses can't access normal refuse services properly because there's been cuts to your council budget. Do you know what I mean? Yes, the cuts to the council budget affect them picking up your rubbish. It affects them, you know, putting lights on your street. It also affects the doctor that you're going to go and see at your GP surgery. The nurse who could be taking your blood pressure or doing a diabetes test. Or the teacher sitting in a classroom teaching your children, your nieces, your nephews, your cousins. It could also affect the person going to the job centre today to say, I've worked all my life. I've paid into the system. I've paid taxes to be treated like they're no one in society. That they should be thankful for what they're getting. But these people have paid into the system all of their life. The problem you've got is when Tuesday night as well, you had big businesses criticise the Chancellor Philip Hammond over the government's handling of Brexit. Now, I, on my personal Facebook, posted a status the other day, and it was just after the vote had come through, and the pound had risen against the dollar, and I believe the euro as well, when Theresa May's vote I don't know what to say about this vote. Miraculously went bye-bye. Got killed, exterminated, eradicated, dead. Never, you know. But anyway, what you have. Alright, so during the election campaign of 2017, and every day since, or every Prime Minister's questions, we hear from the Prime Minister how bad the Labour Party are at looking after the finances of this country. The moment the deal by the government of this country fell on Tuesday, the pound started to rise. So I put it to you that the Conservatives are bad for business, right, on that account. So now we'll talk about they're bad for security, shall we? Now, the Falklands War. Okay, so if we go back and look at history and we look at the Falklands War, the Falklands War came about because Margaret Thatcher's government decided to leave the Falkland Islands unguarded and decided to make military cuts that had to be reversed. So the Conservatives are not only bad for business, they're also bad for security. Another thing that we hear from the Conservative Party all of the time. Then we've got the economy. You know, if a bill can't get passed through the House of Commons, but then the bill doesn't get passed at all, and the pound starts to rise. Now, the only people who can bring a bill to the House of Commons for a vote is the government, is the executive. So I put it to you, they're not also bad for business, and they're not also bad for the security, but they're also bad for the economy of this country. Then we have what's going on in society in general. poverty, the rise of food banks. Yes, food banks came in under the Labour Party, but they have risen to double of what they were, or even quadruple of what they were before they even started. Then we have education. Do you know what I mean? It's very bad. The funding cuts to student finance, the cuts to everything, really, that the Conservatives just disagree with, that allow people from lower income backgrounds to actually succeed, actually to be able to inspire their dreams and actually be able to achieve their goals in life. How about the cuts to disabled people? Shall we really talk about this? As someone with a hidden disability, I find it quite appalling, to say the least. Now, if you read the Conservative Party's Facebook ads, because they like to put these out now and again. By the way, you're the ones paying when Theresa May puts out Facebook ads on the number 10 Downing Street Facebook. We pay for it because it's a government Facebook account. So, according to the Conservatives, they're creating jobs, helping small business, improving roads, cutting in income tax. Hello? If you're cutting income tax, the only problem with that is that the tax bill becomes lower, meaning that the Exchequer's books, the budget becomes lower. So you have less money for education, you have less money to fight to tackle poverty, you have less money to fight the social injustices of the world. You also have less money to put into security, you have less money to put into the economy. So I really do put it to you that whenever an election comes up in the United Kingdom, what you need to do, okay, what you really need to do is think about this. Look at all of the evidence, people. All of the evidence against this government. This government is the first government in its kind to be held in contempt of Parliament, contempt of our legislator, that we all have a vote as United Kingdom citizens to send a representative on our behalf to that Parliament. The sovereignty from the Crown was transferred to the Parliament. So basically, the government acts in the name of the Crown. So does the Parliament. So not only are they in contempt of Parliament because the Crown's sovereignty or the Queen's sovereignty is invested in Parliament, is vested in Parliament. So the executive have gone against the legislator, mind, and this is fine. They're still here, happily married, talking about Brexit and pipe dreams of 1950s Britain. 1950s Britain. Now guys, if you do get a chance, read about the Suez Canal incident. Really do. And if you are dyslexic or anything like that, watch The Crown. It's on there too, on Netflix. But yeah, I'm going to leave you two things. And I know this one as well sounds a rant as an anti-government thing, but when you've got homeless people living in the streets, you have a homeless person who died before Christmas outside the gates of Westminster, outside our Parliament. These MPs who go and vote from the Conservative Party and the DUP who pops them up would have seen these homeless people every bloody day. And how did they react yesterday when they were given a choice to end austerity, to end the incompetence of Theresa May, and to end the incompetence of this government? They decided to vote for themselves, to keep themselves in power, to keep themselves in a job, because Jeremy Corbyn yesterday, before the result, had a 3% lead in the polls. if a general election was called. Now, Theresa May was falling in the poll. So we're going to move on to America and a government shutdown. And we'll be back just after this.
Why is the United States in the midst of a government shutdown? To put it simply, every year, Congress has to pass and the President has to sign laws funding the federal government. In this case, there are a number of departments and agencies that don't have funding, and that has led to
a shutdown.
In a way, the system was designed this way. With separate, co-equal branches of government, you could have a president controlled by one party, Congress, or even a part of Congress controlled by another. That, they believe, fosters compromise and deliberation, but in recent decades, it has been just the opposite.
If we don't have border security, we'll shut down the government.
You have Donald Trump and Republicans demanding money for their wall or they won't pass any new funding.
Does anybody have any doubt?
Democrats being dead set against that.
We're not doing a wall.
And hence, you have a deadlock. In this case, Democrats don't have any real motivation to strike a deal. They just won a sweeping victory in the midterm elections where they have taken control of one chamber of Congress, the House of Representatives. Their base doesn't want a deal. Polls show that the public at large isn't all that jazzed about the idea of Trump's wall, and they blame Donald Trump in particular for the shutdown.
Law enforcement professionals have requested $5.7 billion for a physical barrier.
For Democrats, this is about more than a few $1 billion for a wall. This is about policy priorities and who is going to set them for the remainder of Donald Trump's presidency. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has forced the issue by demanding funding for his wall. And as he himself has admitted, it would be embarrassing if he were to back down.
Build that wall. Build that wall.
His base and conservative commentators have insisted that he take action. The wall was a tangible example, the kind of promises he made on the campaign trail.
We're going to build the wall.
And if he wasn't able to deliver on that promise, it would be very clear when he runs for re-election in 2020. Donald Trump has described this as a
growing humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border.
And a president who backs down in the face of such a crisis wouldn't be much of a leader.
So in America right now, you've got a government shutdown. I believe it's the longest government shutdown that they've had. I'm not going to say much on this because, it's going to have to be another podcast because we're about 2 hours long so far, and I'm really sorry that this is a long one. But I just wanted to get a couple of things off my chest. But the problem with the government shutdown is what people don't seem to understand is, unlike the United Kingdom, when you close the government down, the civil service still functions. There's still money to pay the civil service. The civil service is separate from the government, is separate from the legislature, and is separate from the Crown. So the civil service acts on behalf of the Crown. They're just normal workers. But in America, all of this stops. And that these people don't even get paid their wages. These people have to use food banks like in the UK. They have to go to homeless shelters to have a meal. Some of them actually do lose their houses too. And this is because Donald Trump has gone on to talking about border walls. I'm a little worried here because Donald Trump is a bit of a fool. Not much is done. He invited people to the White House and ordered them a McDonald's. What he's really trying to do, if you watch a program called The West Wing, you can actually trace a couple of Donald Trump's policies back to that TV program. What's quite funny, to tell you the truth. But I don't really know what you can do about it. Besides have another general election in America. That would happen next year in 2020. So, yeah, if you are voting, what I would say to do is actually do your own research. And what I've learnt with Brexit is, if you read news articles from the UK, or from a UK media outlet, it's quite biased towards, do you know what I mean, what the UK want. If you read them from an EU country, it's biased towards the EU. But if you're reading them from a country that's not involved in the European Union project, or involved in or is a part of the UK, so a media organisation that's not here, based in the UK or in the EU, what you actually see is an unbiased truth, the unbiased reviews of the EU and stuff. And I'm starting to feel the same with Trump. If you read about it in the American news, or even in the British news to a point, it's a bit always biased towards him, against him. But if you read it, I think you actually get a thing. But in this case, Trump himself and his fake news rhetoric, he is fake news himself. He proclaims fake news every day. Every day. The man is either living in cloud cuckoo land, or he has just somehow, he's divorced himself from reality or whatsoever. So, anyway, as ever, if you've got any comments about this podcast, please email them to me at Terry D at realtario.co.uk. That's Terry D at realtario.co.uk. Or you can tweet me as well, RT, so it's at RT Terry D, or you can tweet Realtario and it's at Realtario, or you can visit our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Realtario. Remember guys, you can listen to this again on our website, realtarioradio.uk, and I will see you next week. Have a good week, people.
Podcasts brought to you by Real Terrio Radio. Around the world today here on Real Terrio Radio.